Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward. It's currently free, but in the future I'll add a small monthly fee to support the channel. Comment or message me what price feels fair for you. Let's make it comfortable for both sides.
Chapter 1. The year 1510 of the Haiwan calendar, sunny. East Blue, Goa Kingdom, the final destination of the uncertain. A crow swooped down from the sky and landed on a pile of garbage, just about to snatch a rotten apple to eat. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the garbage heap, startling the crow so much that it flapped its wings, and a black feather fell and landed on a young face. Tui! 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 Yang Ming finally managed to climb out of the garbage heap, his whole body aching from exhaustion. He lay sprawled on top of the garbage, panting heavily. As a modern person, Yang Ming would never have imagined that he would be transported to another world the next day simply for staying up all night to do his homework, and in such a bizarre way. A flood of memories from his past life surged through Yang Ming's mind, making him realize his current predicament. This is the Kingdom of Goa, hailed as the most beautiful country in the East Sea. Ironically, this country regards them as filthy beings and abandons them all at an uncertain final destination. These filthy things, besides everyday garbage and waste, also include the people who are marginalized. Unfortunately, Yang Ming's previous life was that of an orphan and a beggar. He could only beg for food every day, abandoned at an uncertain destination to fend for himself, and could only survive by picking up food that city dwellers disliked. No one knows what the original owner ate, but it died instantly, which is why Yang Ming was able to transmigrate and possess this body. Since his predecessor had no name, Yang Ming naturally used his own name instead. Before Yang Ming could sort out his memories, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching from afar, along with a slightly childish voice. "Ace, Sabo, look! That guy's weird. He's sleeping naked on the garbage heap." Yang Ming's ears twitched slightly, and he struggled to sit up, looking in the direction from which the sound came. 3 mischievous children came chasing and playing around. The man in front wore a red sleeveless vest, his black hair was somewhat disheveled by the sea breeze, he always held a steel pipe tightly in his hand, and his sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, always paying attention to the situation nearby. The boy following closely behind was dressed in a blue aristocratic suit and wore a top black hat, his brows exuded a spirit that yearned for freedom. The youngest boy, hanging at the very back, had a straw hat much larger than his head hanging on his back. He was pointing in Yang Ming's direction with one finger, making an exaggerated expression. As a One Piece fan, Yang Ming recognized the 3 people in front of him at a glance as the famous trio of brothers in later generations, Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. Yang Ming knew that Luffy's aesthetic sense was always on the weird side, but he couldn't help but curiously look down at himself. He was short and thin, about the size of a 6 or 7-year-old child. He had no extra clothes on him, and having been buried in a garbage dump for some time, he was covered in filth and emitted a foul stench. When Luffy and his 2 companions arrived in front of Yang Ming, a muffled gurgling sound came from Yang Ming's stomach. Yang Ming's face fell, and he felt a wave of bad luck wash over him. His predecessor spent his days scavenging for food in garbage dumps, barely able to get enough to eat. Now, Yang Ming is so hungry that he's dizzy and weak. Ace, who had been wary and scrutinizing Yang Ming from head to toe, gradually softened his expression after hearing the rumbling of hunger coming from Yang Ming's stomach. They ventured into an uncertain destination, offending many people in the process. This area is often frequented by scavengers, thieves, bandits, and even child traffickers. Previously, Ace had suspected that Yang Ming was a bait used by those people to lure them in. However, it seems that he was overthinking things. Yawning is contagious, and so is hunger. Gurgle. A moment later, Luffy, clutching his shrunken stomach, said, "I'm so hungry. When are we going to eat? Let's go to the beach and get something to eat," Sabo said. Seeing that the three were about to leave, Yang Ming knew that he was all alone and could not survive in this dog-eat-dog world. Only by clinging to these three powerful backers could he survive. So he quickly dragged his tired body and followed behind. My name is Yang Ming. Can I join you? Before Ace and Sabo could even speak, Luffy immediately broke into a hearty laugh. Great! With a new friend joining, I'm no longer at the bottom. Sabo had no objections. Ace was precocious and was unwilling to accept someone whose background he didn't know into their circle. However, Ace also knew that although Luffy seemed silly, he wouldn't invite someone with malicious intentions. With Ace and Sabo's tacit approval, Yang Ming successfully infiltrated their inner circle. To accommodate Yang Ming, the group didn't walk too fast, stopping frequently along the way. They left the area piled with garbage and arrived at the beach. Beneath the azure sky lies the boundless sea, where seagulls occasionally swoop down from the heavens, lightly touch the water, and bent down to snatch a fish. The four divided the work. Ace and Sabo were responsible for fishing, Luffy was responsible for finding flammable materials nearby, such as twigs and scraps of paper, and Yang Ming, being weak, stayed behind, picking up seashells and conches nearby while building a simple campfire with the firewood Luffy had gathered. Yang Ming had previously gone to summer camp with his classmates and played in the woods outside the city, so he had some experience and the process of building a campfire went smoothly. When Ace and Sabo returned, each carrying a large salmon on their shoulders, the campfire was already ablaze. Sabo pulled a switchblade from his pocket and expertly scraped off the scales from the salmon. During this time, Ace and Yang Ming chatted casually, and Ace also inquired about Yang Ming's background. When Ace learned that Yang Ming was a homeless beggar orphan, he understood somewhat. Beings like Yang Ming's predecessor are not uncommon in the Goa Kingdom. The Kingdom of Goa was very backward, and the gap between the rich and poor was extremely wide. Technological advancements from the Grand Line only circulated among the nobility of the Goa Kingdom, not among the lower classes. Ordinary people still earn meager incomes by cultivating land and planting cash crops such as cotton and rubber, using their cheap labor to sell raw materials to merchants at low prices. If an unforeseen event occurs, ordinary people will be unable to obtain enough resources to survive. They will either risk going out to sea to become pirates or take the risk of engaging in robbery, a risky business with no initial investment. Generally speaking, ordinary people who do such things usually end up imprisoned or die without a proper burial. Only a very small number of people can become famous pirates. Most people, probably not long after deciding to become pirates, would be reported by their neighbors, arrested by the city guards, and thrown into jail. Yang Ming, do you have a dream? Before Yang Ming could answer, Luffy patted his chest and shouted with soaring ambition. My dream is to become the Pirate King and obtain the legendary One Piece. Ace and Sabo both covered their faces. Having such a Chiyunibu, delusional, younger brother really leaves them speechless. A dream. Yang Ming looked up at the blue sky and white clouds at a 45-degree angle, his thoughts seemingly returning to his past life. As a student, Yang Ming's motivation is to study hard, get into a prestigious university after the college entrance examination, and then work hard to pass the postgraduate entrance examination and the civil service examination to become a civil servant. In this way, he will no longer have to worry about making a living and will have a secure retirement. Yes, this is Yang Ming's ordinary dream. Yang Ming snapped out of his thoughts, shrugged, and said, work less, earn more, get something for nothing, that's my ideal. As soon as Yang Ming finished speaking, a voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Ding! Host detected to meet system binding qualifications. Now officially bound to the meme-making lottery system. Once the host utters classic lines from movies, TV shows, anime, novels, etc., they will receive a chance to win exquisite prizes. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from under one person. You now have one chance to draw a prize. Would you like to activate the prize wheel? System? A glint of light flashed in Yang Ming's eyes. Every time traveler has a system. Yang Ming originally thought he was an exception, but he never expected to get a system himself. Moreover, it seems this system is quite remarkable. Simply by repeatedly reciting various lines, one can continuously gain chances to win prizes. And once a powerful prize is won, wouldn't that be like taking off from nowhere? Filled with excitement, Yang Ming outwardly remained calm, continuing to chat with Ace and the other two to build rapport, while secretly using up his lottery chances. In Yang Ming's line of sight, a roulette wheel that was invisible to others appeared. The prize wheel is divided into several large squares, each corresponding to a different prize. Summoned characters: Zhang Hulan, Feng Baobao, Zhao Fangxiu, Xiao Zizai, Zhang Huai, Wu Jinshen. The 8 extraordinary skills: Qi Body Source Flow, Feng Ho Qi Men, Divine Mechanism Refinement, Spirit Binding, and General Command. 6 treasuries: Immortal Thief, Great Luo Cave Observation, Heavenly Record, and Dual-Handed Techniques. Cultivation Techniques: 5 Thunder Orthodox Method, Complete True Internal Alchemy Technique, Object Manipulation, Wuhaokuman. It can even summon characters. Looking at the prizes on the lottery wheel, Yang Ming really wanted to complain. Only children make choices, adults want it all. However, Yang Ming also knew that the system was the boss and its actions were completely beyond his control. Under the curious gazes of Ace and the others, Yang Ming ran to the beach, washed his dirty hands with seawater, then clasped his hands together in front of his chest and sincerely recited in his heart: Amitabha Buddha, Holy Mary, Sasuke, Infinite Heavenly Venerable, you must draw the prize I want. Seemingly deeply moved, the lottery wheel suddenly burst into a dazzling golden light. In the depths of his mind, Yang Ming seemed to hear a voice echoing in his head. The Golden Legend. The next moment, Yang Ming was pleasantly surprised to see that the prize he had drawn was actually. Chapter 2. Under Yang Ming's tense gaze, the pointer of the lottery wheel slowly stopped at the 8 extraordinary skills column. 6 treasures: Immortal Thief, the ultimate body forging method. By training the large intestine, small intestine, stomach, triple burner, gallbladder, and bladder, it creates a body that is immune to all poisons. Furthermore, because it can perfectly absorb the energy from food, it can slowly increase physical fitness. When it reaches its peak, it can even quickly repair physical injuries. The 6 treasuries: Immortal Thief, also known as the Sage Thief. As long as sages exist, great thieves will never cease. From its inception, the 6 treasures: Immortal Thieves aimed to seize the life force of heaven and earth for their own use. After the lottery ended, a large amount of information about the 6 treasures: Immortal Thief flooded into Yang Ming's mind. As if born with the ability, Yang Ming's body automatically activated the 6 treasures: Immortal Thief technique. With each breath, his abdomen expanded and contracted, and he felt the turbid air in his body being exhaled, while the pure air between heaven and earth was inhaled, giving him a refreshing feeling. However, after just one round trip, Yang Ming felt even hungrier. Those who cultivate the 6 treasures: Immortal Thief technique can all be described as gluttons. Yang Ming immediately returned to the campfire, took the switchblade handed to him by Sabo, and without caring that the fish was only half cooked, he immediately scraped off a piece of meat from the fish and swallowed it in one gulp. Hot! 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 The still steaming fish meat, upon entering Yang Ming's mouth, not only brought a scalding sensation but also a fresh and tender taste. A mouthful of fish slid down the throat and into the stomach, and the entire digestive system began to move, quickly digesting the fish and extracting its essence. Wisps of qi began to flow through the limbs and meridians. Yang Ming felt a warm current rising from his abdomen, and his energy and spirit were invigorated. The 2 large salmon that Ace and Sabo caught weighed over 10 kilograms each and were propped up on the campfire with over a dozen wooden forks. As Yang Ming wolfed down his food, it immediately whetted the appetites of the other 3, who, disregarding everything else, joined the fray, scrambling for the remaining fish. In Yang Ming's previous life, a large salmon weighing over 10 kilograms was enough to feed an adult for several days. However, it is obvious that the physical constitution of humans in the One Piece world is much stronger than that of humans in the previous world. Not to mention that Luffy, Ace, and Sabo are all extraordinary chosen ones who could even swallow an entire cow if they opened their stomachs. The four of them devoured the two large salmon in a flash, leaving only the stark white bones burning in the campfire. The four men sat in four different locations, each lying on the sand, their bellies visibly bulging into mounds of earth. Each had a fishbone dangling from their mouth to pick their teeth, looking utterly content. Friendships between men can sometimes be very simple. We fought side by side, scaled walls together, and shared our girlfriends. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo are still young. Although Ace and Sabo are older and seem much more mature than the average child, they are also unusually simple in this regard. As long as they have drunk together and had a big meal, they are considered good friends. Without realizing it, Yang Ming integrated himself into this small group in this way. Of course, at this moment, Yang Ming was unaware of this, as he was wholeheartedly focused on sensing the changes within his body. After consuming a large amount of food, Yang Ming's hunger crisis was not only resolved, but also, nourished by the qi within his body, the damaged organs in his previously frail body, which had been constantly starving, began to slowly repair themselves. Long-term hunger will first damage the stomach, then the internal organs, and finally the flesh and bones. The qi nourished silently, like a massage for these damaged areas, and Yang Ming could feel a tingling sensation arise spontaneously. Moreover, the predecessor suffered food poisoning from accidentally eating food while scavenging garbage, and the toxins that had accumulated in its body were successfully expelled. During this process, Yang Ming went to the toilet twice, taking care of his personal matters behind a nearby shady rock. Yang Ming even noticed that a crab had been attracted to the pit he dug, and after coming into contact with the excrement, it immediately foamed at the mouth and fainted. It's easy to imagine that if these toxins were allowed to accumulate in his body, Yang Ming probably wouldn't live more than 7 days. After the toxins in his body were cleared, Yang Ming felt a great weight lifted off his shoulders, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Blue sky and white clouds, a gentle sea breeze. Feeling the gentle, ocean-scented breeze blowing in his face, Yang Ming felt better than ever before. I know the plot's development perfectly, and I possess a system. As long as things go well, I'm sure I'll have a place in the new world. Looking at the boundless blue sea, Yang Ming felt a surge of excitement. Whose youth is without dreams? Who doesn't yearn for freedom? However, due to the helplessness and constraints of reality, for the sake of their studies, their future, and their families, they often have no choice but to temporarily give up those unattainable dreams, bow to reality, and strive for a stable government job instead. Of course, before that, Yang Ming also needed to think carefully about what lines he should come up with. As a miserable senior in high school, I spend every day either studying or on my way to exams, with virtually no time for leisure. Besides, most TV dramas these days are just about romance. The actors have no expressions and no effort, making viewers cringe so much they could dig a whole room out of the floor with their toes. Yang Ming had only talked about well-known games and anime with a few close friends in his spare time, and he hadn't really made a point of memorizing the lines. Now, trying to recall them slowly was not an easy task. Just as Yang Ming was deep in thought, the sound of footsteps approaching from afar interrupted his train of thought. The person arrived before the voice did. Ha ha ha, finally found you bunch of brats. If I can capture you and bring you back, the captain will reward me handsomely. Upon hearing this, Luffy and his two companions strained their waists and abdomens, and with a somersault, they stood up from the sand. Yang Ming reacted a beat too slowly, looking in the direction from which the sound came. 3 disheveled pirates walked over with grins. Pirates spend most of their time at sea or working on the coast, exposed to the scorching sun year after year. Their skin becomes dark and rough, their messy hair is stained with oil and dust, and their clothes are filthy and smell of sweat that can be smelled from a distance. These 3 pirates were robust and strong. Although they didn't have particularly thick muscles, their muscles were very firm. Besides a roguish air, there was also a menacing aura between their brows, indicating that they had clearly been through a lot of fighting. Yang Ming's gaze sharpened. He recognized the leader of the pirates as Borshemi, a member of the Bursum pirates. The Bursum pirates were just an unknown small pirate crew. Captain Bursum's bounty did not exceed 10 million berries, and most of his crew members were minor characters with bounties between 10,000 and 100,000 berries. That's true, but it also depends on who's facing these vicious pirates. For ordinary people, especially an ordinary child, these 3 pirates were a menace, enough to pin Yang Ming to the ground and rub him hundreds of times over. As Borshemi drew ever closer, Ace and his 2 companions lined up in a triangular formation, their muscles tense, ready for battle. As for escaping? With their speed, trying to escape 3 pirates who had spent years roaming the seas was simply a pipe dream. Needless to say, these 3 pirates also had flintlock pistols tucked into their belts. Turning their backs to the enemy's guns was the most foolish thing they could do. Ace, with his back to Yang Ming, said in a deep voice. Yang Ming, they're all looking for us. This has nothing to do with you. You'd better run. Run as far as you can. A flicker of struggle crossed Yang Ming's eyes. Honestly, he had only just acquired the 6 treasures Immortal Thief, and because his predecessor hadn't exercised or eaten enough for many years, his physical condition was inferior to that of an average child, let alone comparable to Ace and the other 2. If he stayed here, he would only become a burden and risk being killed by the enemy. If Yang Ming had chosen to play it safe at this time, hiding far away to develop his strength, he could have become a renowned powerhouse through the system in due time. But is this the result Yang Ming wanted? Yang Ming recalled his previous interactions with Ace and the other 2. If it weren't for their acceptance, he probably wouldn't have been able to live alone. In that dog-eat-dog world of uncertain destinations, one might even become the lowest of the food chains, starving to death on the road at any moment. Yang Ming's consistent philosophy is, if someone treats me with respect, I will treat them with even greater respect. Ace and his 2 companions gave Yang Ming a chance to live. Now, asking him to abandon his friends and escape alone is simply impossible for him. Besides, Yang Ming knew perfectly well that Ace and his 2 companions were no ordinary children. Each of them had an extraordinary background and had undergone brutal training since childhood. There was no way that 3 mere extras-level pirates could kill them. These thoughts flashed through Yang Ming's mind, but he quickly straightened his expression and firmly refused Ace's kind offer. Ace, Sabo, Luffy, I will never abandon my friends and live on alone. After saying that, Yang Ming stood with the 3 of them. Ace's lips curled up slightly, and when he turned to look at Yang Ming, his eyes held a hint of approval. Clearly, Ace's words just now, besides genuinely wanting Yang Ming to leave, also served as a test for Yang Ming. If Yang Ming were to leave, Ace would understand, but their relationship would then remain that of ordinary friends. But Yang Ming chose to step forward and fight alongside them, which shows he deserves to be a brother. Seeing that the 4 of them were still chatting as if no one else was around, Borshemi's face turned ugly, feeling that he was being ignored. He immediately stopped, drew his flintlock pistol from his waist, released the safety, pointed the muzzle at Yang Ming, and revealed a ferocious smile. Start by killing the weakest ones. Die, you brat! Chapter 3 Q. What's it like to be shot in the head in front of someone? Yang Ming really didn't know. From the moment the pirate Borshemi drew his gun and fired, Yang Ming's dynamic vision couldn't keep up with the bullet's speed, making it impossible for him to detect the bullet's trajectory, let alone react in time to dodge. As the bullet drew ever closer to Yang Ming's forehead, Borshemi's smile widened. He could already foresee the bullet piercing the brat's head the next moment. Don't even think about hurting him. Just then, a small, thin figure suddenly darted out from the side. Luffy took a deep breath, letting the air fill his rubbery body. His entire body expanded rapidly like an inflating balloon, visibly growing larger and larger, completely obscuring Yang Ming's figure behind him with his bulging, wide abdomen. Bang! The bullet landed on Luffy's soft belly, only causing it to dent, but it couldn't penetrate. On the contrary, as the bullet's momentum diminished, Luffy's belly, with its strong elasticity, quickly forced the bullet out of his body and bounced it back at an even faster speed. Holy crap! Borsehemi was terrified and only had time to dodge to the side. Unfortunately, the ricocheting bullet was traveling at high speed, and he was only able to dodge it to a vital spot, but was hit in the thigh. Fortunately, it wasn't hit by a bullet, so the impact wasn't that powerful. Although the force of the bullet couldn't penetrate Borsehemi's thigh, it still embedded itself deeply into his thigh muscles. A sharp pain shot through his leg, causing Borsehemi to gasp. His expression turned cold, and he barked at his two companions, saying, "What are you all standing there for? Shoot!" The boss said that when dealing with these brats, we should either find them alive or dead. The two companions snapped out of their daze and quickly drew their guns from their waists. Taking advantage of the moment when Luffy was protecting Yang Ming, Ace, and Sabo, with perfect teamwork, charged forward from the left and right. Ordinary pirates have terrible marksmanship. They can hit 4 out of 10 shots against stationary targets, but their accuracy drops by at least half when they are shooting at moving targets. Moreover, Ace and Sabo had undergone brutal training since childhood, not running in a straight line, but running in an irregular S-shape to constantly dodge oncoming bullets. The flintlock pistols carried by ordinary pirates are outdated models. After firing a bullet, there is a 3-second interval before firing again. This is to allow the heated barrel to cool down, otherwise the flintlock pistol could easily explode. 3 seconds is neither a long nor a short time, it's enough for Ace and Sabo to get close enough to two ordinary pirates. Ace, who had spent years fighting with thugs and petty criminals, knew he was at a disadvantage in terms of strength compared to ordinary pirates. Therefore, he didn't intend to confront his enemies head-on. Instead, he used a burst of speed to his advantage and then slid in with a tackle. The soft sand provided the perfect spot for a sliding tackle, allowing Ace to kick an ordinary pirate in the shin, causing the pirate to lose his balance and fall to the side. Before the other party could react, a little boy in a blue aristocratic suit rushed out from the side. Sabo pulled 2 iron pipes from his waist and joined them together to form a long steel rod. He swung the rod around in a circle, then suddenly leaped up and struck the back of the ordinary pirate's head with the rod. The back of the head is a vulnerable part of the human body and is closely connected to the nerves of the brain. The moment he was hit on the head, the ordinary pirate's eyes rolled back and he instantly fainted. This is the body's stress response, designed to protect the brain from damage caused by short-term stimulation. With Sabo's strength, he could only stun the enemy for a short time, the enemy would soon wake up again. Huff! Huff! Sabo stood firm, his chest heaving violently as he exhaled deeply. Don't be fooled by how easily he moved just now. He was facing ordinary pirates who could shoot at any moment. One wrong move and he would be shot dead. He was constantly dancing on the edge of a knife, which put a lot of psychological pressure on him. Sabo sighed, put one hand on his hip, and grinned at Borsehemi and another ordinary pirate, saying something rather irritating in a provocative tone. You guys are so weak, why don't you shoot me if you dare? Come on! Come on! He he he! As he spoke, Sabo stuck his tongue out at the pirates, doing everything he could to insult them. Borsehemi and his companions felt their dignity as adults being trampled on by a little kid. They were instantly enraged, their blood boiling, and without thinking, they immediately opened fire on Sabo's location. Bang! Bang! The moment the two men raised their guns, Sabo reacted in advance, performing a tactical roll to the side, letting the pirates behind him become his human punching bag. With Sabo no longer in his way, the 2 bullets predictably struck the poor pirate. Seriously, that was a huge blow to my teammate. Stabbed in the back by his comrade, the unfortunate fellow let out a pig-like scream as he awoke from his dazed state, only to find himself inexplicably shot twice in the back. Who shot me? Borshemi and his companions guiltily averted their gazes, not daring to utter a sound. I don't know whether to say that these pirates' firearms are outdated or that the people in the One Piece world are incredibly fit. The ordinary pirate who had been shot actually staggered to his feet on the sand, seemingly still capable of fighting. Seeing the amazing teamwork between Ace and Sabo, Yang Ming was secretly amazed. It must be said that the signs of someone becoming a powerful figure in the future are already evident from a young age. The two acted decisively, cooperated extremely well, and their movements were skillful and fluid. It was clear that they had done this more than once and had developed their own style. It's just a pity that children's strength is ultimately too small. If an adult had struck a regular pirate on the back of the head with a stick, the pirate would have been stunned for much longer than just a short time. Having learned their lesson, Borshemi and his companion hastily tore a strip of cloth from their clothes, haphazardly bandaged the wound, and then tried to tighten the encirclement, trapping Ace and Sabo in a small area and reducing their room to maneuver. If they succeed, Ace and Sabo will be in danger. Seeing the critical situation, Yang Ming immediately whispered something to Luffy, and the two grabbed a handful of sand from the ground and rushed to their friend's aid. This run alone was enough to demonstrate the difference in their physical abilities. Luffy didn't exert much effort, yet he quickly surged ahead, leaving Yang Ming far behind and soon attracting the attention of the three pirates. Yang Ming, on the other hand, was slow and obviously weak, so he didn't attract much attention from the three pirates. When Yang Ming finally approached the battlefield, the two sides were locked in a fierce battle. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, all experienced fighters, took full advantage of their small stature, circling around the three pirates. Because they were very close to each other, and having learned their lesson from their earlier mistake of shooting their teammates, Borshemi and his two companions knew they weren't sharpshooters. They all refrained from firing to avoid causing further accidental injuries to their teammates. After abandoning their shooting, the three pirates immediately revealed their ferocious side, launching a barrage of attacks whenever they had the chance. Just now, Ace was caught off guard and Borshemi grabbed him by the back of the neck, delivering a series of powerful knee kicks that made his stomach churn and almost caused him to vomit up all the fish and meat he had eaten for lunch. Fortunately, Luffy arrived in time and, following Yang Ming's advice, threw the handful of sand he was holding. Tui! 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 Borshemi suffered temporary blindness after getting sand in his eyes. Luffy suddenly jumped up and bit down hard on Borshemi's wrist, causing him to drop Ace in pain and allowing Ace to escape. Just as Borshemi finally managed to rub the sand out of his eyes, Yang Ming arrived by sheer coincidence and gave him another handful of fresh, hot sand, causing him to briefly go blind once again. In the brief moment when his vision was restored, Borshemi saw Yang Ming's blurry figure, and his chest was instantly filled with boundless rage. If I can't handle Ace and his two companions, I can certainly handle you. You brat, once I catch you, I'll make sure you're torn to pieces. With a furious roar, Borshemi lunged toward the location where Yang Ming was, attempting to use his height and weight advantage to tackle Yang Ming to the sand. Fortunately, Yang Ming has a strong learning ability. After observing the cooperation between Ace and Sabo, he understood something. The moment Borshemi raised his arms, he sensed something was wrong and rolled on the ground in a rather awkward way to avoid the enemy's attack. Yang Ming stood up again and looked in the direction of Borshemi. Perhaps because the opponent's movements were too large, the flintlock pistol clipped to his tactical belt flew off and landed not far from Yang Ming. A glint flashed in Yang Ming's eyes, and he immediately mustered his strength and rushed forward, retrieving the old-style flintlock pistol from the ground. Just then, Borshemi got up from the ground, wiped the sand from his eyes to restore his vision, and saw that the brat he had previously disregarded was now giving him a half-smile. None of that matters. The important thing is that this brat is standing right in front of him, raising his flintlock pistol with both hands, aiming at his lower body at close range. Yang Ming knew very well that if he fell into the hands of these vicious pirates, the least he would suffer would be being sold to human traffickers. So without hesitation, he immediately shot at the man's genitals. Chickens flew and eggs were smashed, blood and flesh flew everywhere. Yang Ming blew a breath, dispersing the smoke from the gun barrel, and said coldly, "Death is like the wind, always by my side." Chapter 4. When is a woman experiencing the most pain? Caesarean section. When is a man experiencing the most pain? Castrated. Boris Hemi was honored to become the first pirate in the One Piece world to be castrated. He felt blood gushing from his wound, and waves of intense pain surged into his brain. His face contorted in pain, he clutched his wound with both hands, and knelt on the ground. A large amount of cold sweat broke out on his forehead, sliding down his temples and quickly blurring his vision. He could only make out the outline of a flintlock pistol close at hand, its dark muzzle pointed at his forehead. "No. Don't." Borshami's weak pleas for mercy did not quell the murderous intent in the eyes of the short boy before him. Bang! As the boy pulled the trigger, a bright yellow bullet shot out, piercing straight through the pirate's head. The corpse collapsed to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Yang Ming's hands, gripping the butt of the gun, trembled slightly, partly due to the strong recoil of the flintlock rifle, and partly due to the lingering effects of his first murder. "I killed someone." The air was thick with the lingering smell of gunpowder, mixed with the pungent odor of freshly cooked blood, causing Yang Ming's stomach to churn. But Yang Ming knew that the world of One Piece was an extremely cruel world, where the weak had no control over their own destiny. If one wanted to become stronger, sooner or later one would have to embark on this path, and one's hands would be stained with blood. With immense willpower, Yang Ming forcibly suppressed his body's instinctive discomfort and gasped for breath. During the break, Yang Ming glanced at it out of the corner of his eye. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy are working together seamlessly, having already outmaneuvered the other two ordinary pirates. It's estimated that they will be able to defeat the enemy soon. During this time, Yang Ming checked the system notification he had just received. Ding! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from League of Legends. You have been awarded one chance to draw a prize. Would you like to start the prize wheel? Yes. In Yang Ming's line of sight, a lottery wheel gradually appeared, invisible to others, divided into 4 sections: normal skills, hero skills, equipment items, and hero skins. Common skills: barrier, purge, insight, ignite, weakness, blink, ghost step, heal, clarity, guardian, crossbow, retribution, mark, teleport. Hero abilities: shattering flame, lava shield, alpha strike, meditation, Wuju style, void blade, energy pulse, void sphere. Equipment items: hextech belt, righteous glory, twin shadows, trinity force, boots of speed. Champion skins: pulse fire, steel wings, Lu bulletin, feng xian, champion's blade. The prizes on the lucky draw wheel were dazzling and overwhelming. There are even so-called hero skins. Yang Ming wasn't sure if obtaining a hero skin would transform him into a hero from League of Legends. Of course, it's too early to talk about these things now, let's focus on the prizes and awards. When the lottery pointer landed on the regular skills section, Yang Ming's eyes lit up. Flash allows you to instantly teleport a short distance to a designated location, with a maximum distance of 100 meters. The skill has a 5-minute cooldown. Flash is a highly strategic skill, combining escape, evasion, and pursuit. If used well, it can make you incredibly flashy. After resting, Yang Ming checked the ammunition in his flintlock pistol and found that he had just 1 bullet left. He looked up at the remaining 2 ordinary pirates, his gaze settling on the pirate who had been badly beaten by his comrade. Flash! The next instant, Yang Ming's figure disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he landed behind the pirate like a ghost, gripping the flintlock pistol in both hands, and without hesitation aimed at the back of the man's head and pulled the trigger. Bang! The pirate was dealing with Ace when someone suddenly appeared from behind him. By the time he heard a gunshot from behind and tried to dodge, it was too late. The pirate was shot and died. Ace looked at the boy blowing smoke into the gun barrel, a look of surprise on his face. Ace, with his keen eyes and ears, had been keeping a close eye on the battle and was well aware that Yang Ming had instantly appeared behind the enemy, an ability that was simply unbelievable. Could it be that Yang Ming is a devil fruit user? Ace didn't press the issue, not only because it wasn't the right time, but also because it was Yang Ming's secret. If Yang Ming didn't want to tell him, it would only cause unpleasantness between them. Only one ordinary pirate remained on the field, and he was no match for the four of them. With a blood-curdling scream, the pirate's life came to an end. Well done! Ace gave the three of them a thumbs up, then frowned slightly and said, "These three are all members of the Bursum Pirates. If they don't return for a long time, it will definitely attract Bursum's attention. We must leave this area as soon as possible, otherwise, if we encounter an ambush by the Bursum Pirates on the way, we won't be able to escape." Ace's suggestion was sound, and none of Yang Ming and the other two objected. With nowhere else to go, Yang Ming naturally clung to powerful figures. Before leaving, Yang Ming searched the three corpses, seizing 2 flintlock pistols and 20,000 berries, before returning to Dodon's house with Ace and the others. The island where the Kingdom of Goa is located is surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, called Mount Golpo, which blocks the cold and humid air currents from the north, making the climate here pleasant and habitable. Dodon's house is located in the dense forest of Mount Gorbo, in the southeastern corner of the Goa Kingdom, very close to the Uncertainty Terminal Station, probably no more than 5 kilometers away. The mountainous terrain is steep and difficult to traverse, with dense shrubs and grasses. As the sun sets, its last rays filter through the gaps in the leaves, casting dappled patterns of light. The sounds of insects chirping and birds singing rose and fell in the woods, with the cicadas' calls filling the air. Following a narrow path, Yang Ming pushed aside the bushes blocking his view and saw a wooden house with 2 courtyards. A woman who looked fierce was chopping firewood with an axe in the front yard. Upon hearing the noise coming from the woods, the woman suddenly turned her head to look. The woman looked precocious. At 30, she should have been in the prime of her life, but she had the face of a 50-year-old woman. Her orange curly hair was tied back, looking somewhat unkempt. Even a white shirt couldn't hide her muscular, bear-like figure. She wore dark green plaid trousers with brown boots, gold earrings, and a red beaded necklace. This didn't reveal any femininity at all, on the contrary, paired with that fierce face, it was somewhat frightening. The moment Dodon saw Ace and his group, she threw down her axe. Though overjoyed, she maintained a stern expression, hands on her hips, and angrily rebuked them. "Ace, Sabo, Luffy, why are you 3 so late? Don't you know it's dangerous outside at night?" Having been subjected to Dodon's loving fists for years, Ace and his 2 companions were immediately trembling and bowed repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. X3. Seeing that the 3 were remorseful and their attitude was good, Dodon's expression softened considerably. He crossed his arms and said gently, "Come on in, we have guests tonight, and I've prepared a sumptuous feast for you." Dodon paused slightly, seemingly only then noticing the unexpected guest in the group, and asked, "Who is this child?" Ace stepped forward and explained Yang Ming's background in detail. At the same time, Ace also recounted his experiences before returning, detailing how Yang Ming fought alongside them and was a brother worth befriending. Upon hearing that Yang Ming was an orphan with no parents and had been scavenging for a living at an uncertain destination for many years, Dodon, with a cheap cigarette dangling from her lips, said, "Tch, another brat. Does he think this is an orphanage?" Despite saying this, Dodin pulled Yang Ming into her arms without saying a word and forcibly led him towards the wooden house. Yang Ming was so tightly embraced that he could barely breathe. In particular, Dadan's chest was not soft at all. On the contrary, due to long-term and unremitting training, his chest was as hard as a steel plate, making him feel as if he was being pressed against a steel plate and rubbed repeatedly. Fortunately, this painful torment did not last long. As soon as Dodin released his arms, Yang Ming took a deep breath. He had never imagined that being alive could be so wonderful, or that the air could be so fresh. Women are just too terrifying. Dodin pushed open the door of the wooden house, and the scene inside came into view. The wooden cabin has 2 floors. The first floor hall is not decorated in a fancy way, but it is very well arranged. The walls are painted with bright colors, and the kerosene lamps emit a warm yellow light, making the place very cozy. Inside the house, small groups of bandits were carrying barrels full of rum or placing cooked roast meat on the dining table. At the head of the table, which was covered with a white tablecloth, sat a burly figure wearing a dog head hat, a naval uniform, and a white cloak with the words Justice written on it. When Yang Ming's gaze fell on this person, his pupils immediately contracted. The next instant, the man sitting in the main seat left his seat and appeared in front of them at an extremely fast speed, as if he had teleported. He raised his fist, which was the size of a sandbag, and punched Ace and the other 2 without saying a word. Thump! 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 The fist landed on the heads of the 3 men. Even though Luffy had eaten a devil fruit, he still had a huge bump on his head, and the pain almost brought tears to his eyes. Garp was getting into a rhythm, and seeing Yang Ming standing nearby, he prepared to deliver a loving punch. Yang Ming had no desire to experience Garp's iron fist, it would definitely be unpleasant, and with his frail physique, who knew what might happen? Flash! Yang Ming spotted an empty seat next to the dining table and immediately disappeared from Garp's sight. Hey! Garp let out a surprised exclamation. When he turned around, he saw Yang Ming sitting in his seat, giving him a polite smile. This kid's got some interesting. Chapter 5. 1 month later. Giggle giggle. A rooster's crow broke the silence of the night. As dawn broke, glistening dewdrops still clung to the leaves in the forest. Footsteps approached from afar, 4 children were running for their lives. Behind them was a ferocious lone wolf, with sharp teeth and eerie green eyes, relentlessly closing in. Yang Ming was drenched in sweat, utterly speechless. Since Garp took leave from Navy headquarters to return to the East Blue a month ago, he has been treating the 4 of them with the utmost hospitality. This training, known as the Death Race, is a program designed to train Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. Yang Ming has officially started staying with Dodin's family. Moreover, because he used Flash in front of Garp, he left a very deep impression on Garp. This was originally a training program for Luffy and his 2 companions, but after Yang Ming rested for a month, he was brought along today as well. Of course, Yang Ming's own willingness also played a part in this. Yang Ming knew very well that in this world, the Navy had a systematic training method, and Garp, as a naval hero, naturally had his own unique training methods. But isn't this method a bit too unique? Is it all about the thrill? Yang Ming didn't need to turn around to see, he could feel the wolf's rapid breathing behind him and its eyes that seemed to be intent on devouring him. During this race against death, Garp forbade the 4 of them to use force to resist, leaving them no choice but to be chased by the wolves. If they stopped, they would face terrible news. Facing the threat of death can bring out the maximum potential within the human body. Yang Ming could feel his adrenaline surging, and his blood and qi were about to boil. Over the past month, if it weren't for the abundant nutritional meals provided by Dodin's family, which, under the operation of the 6 treasures immortal thieves, maximized the extraction of nutrients from the food to nourish Yang Ming's depleted body and even slowly improve his physical fitness, Yang Ming would probably have collapsed on the ground from exhaustion after running only a short distance. The large intestine, small intestine, stomach, triple burner, gallbladder, and bladder, 6 parts in total, constantly emitted accumulated qi, replenishing Yang Ming's physical strength and enabling him to persevere in this race against death. Carp hid in the forest, holding a bag in one hand and munching on a donut in the other. When Garp saw Yang Ming lagging behind the group, despite having no prior training and today being his first time undergoing such high-intensity training, he couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. This kid, you can tell at a glance he's a good candidate for the Navy. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, those 3 kids have gone astray. They're always thinking about going to sea and becoming pirates. This time, we absolutely can't let Yang Ming be influenced by those 3 brats. He should come back with me and become a glorious marine. Wolves are not suited for long-distance raids. Once they exceed 5 kilometers, their stamina begins to give out, and once they exceed 10 kilometers, they are unwilling to continue pursuing their enemies. With 4 prey right in front of it, yet unable to catch them no matter what it did, the wolf ran for 10 kilometers before giving up and turning away. Only after the wolf had gone far away and they were sure it wouldn't turn back did Yang Ming and his companions decide to stop. It is not advisable to sit down and rest after a long run. So Yang Ming leaned against a tree trunk and gasped for breath. Huff! 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 Sweat had soaked through Yang Ming's clothes, making him look as if he had just been pulled out of the sea. Yang Ming had never trained so intensely before. He felt a spasm in his leg muscles and had to endure the fatigue by stretching in place to relieve the discomfort. After a while, Garp suddenly appeared out of nowhere, threw the bag he was carrying on the ground, and grinned. "You brats, hurry up and eat something. After you finish eating, even more brutal training awaits you." Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were already used to Garp's sudden appearance, and they were all physical prodigies who could run 10 kilometers without getting out of breath, as if they had just finished warming up. Yang Ming dragged his weary body closer. The bag was filled with high-energy, high-nutrient foods such as cream bread, cheesecake, and boxed milk, which can replenish the energy consumed by the body. First come, first served, slow and gone. Seeing Ace and the other 2 wolfing down their food like starving ghosts, Yang Ming wasn't going to be left behind and quickly grabbed a cheesecake and swallowed it in one gulp. Meanwhile, thanks to the 6 treasures immortal thief technique, which is constantly in operation, the cheesecake was digested at an astonishing speed as soon as it entered my stomach, and transformed into qi that flowed through my limbs and meridians. These energies, like a skilled massage therapist, kneaded Yang Ming's spasming leg muscles, gradually calming the soreness in his legs. After finishing 5 butter bread rolls the size of rugby balls and 10 cheesecakes the size of an adult's palm, Yang Ming drank 800 ml of pure milk in one go before he finally felt his strength return and that there was still some qi left in his body. It's not advisable to engage in strenuous training right after a meal. Garp then led the 4 back to the backyard of Dodon's house and began to explain combat techniques to them. The essence of combat is to subdue the enemy with minimal losses and in the shortest possible time. We need to have a clear understanding of ourselves and our enemies. The most vulnerable parts of the human body are as follows. There are several aspects to the technique of generating power in a punch. Not long after Garp spoke, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy started yawning repeatedly, almost falling asleep on the spot. Only Yang Ming took out paper and pen from the room, feeling as if he had returned to his previous life to attend class, and carefully wrote down everything that Garp had said. Seeing that Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were not paying attention, Garp's forehead veins bulged. Fortunately, Yang Ming was there to diligently jot down his thoughts and feelings, which finally gave Garp a sense of satisfaction in having found a mentor and prevented him from flying into a rage on the spot. The teacher loves to teach, and the students are eager to learn. Yang Ming was like a dried-up sponge, absorbing all of Garp's combat skills from his many years of military service. Although it's all just theoretical knowledge at the moment, it has opened a door for Yang Ming, letting him know that fighting is also an art, not just a reckless act of throwing punches. Luffy's method of defeating his master with random punches doesn't count. After explaining for an hour, Garp estimated in his mind that the four of them had probably finished resting, so he clapped his hands and said, "That concludes today's lesson, we will now move on to the practical session." Having said that, Garp disappeared into the forest. Not long after, accompanied by several mournful roars from the forest, Garp was seen dragging a black bear out of the woods. The black bear had a large bump on its head and looked aggrieved. It clearly didn't understand how it could have provoked Garp, this fierce god, when it was sleeping peacefully in its den. Garp tossed the black bear in front of Yang Ming and his companions, saying, "You will take turns coming up and fighting this black bear one-on-one. Remember, you can't use any firearms, you can only rely on your physical strength and combat skills." At this point, Garp specifically looked at Yang Ming. Yang Ming gave an embarrassed smile and had no choice but to throw the two flintlock pistols he had seized from the pirates at his waist onto the ground. Animals in the world of One Piece are very intelligent and perceptive. The black bear seemed to understand Garp's words, and a sudden surge of anger welled up inside it. "Damn it, they beat me up first thing in the morning and dragged me out of my lair just to be sparring partners for these four human brats?" The black bear got up from the ground and suddenly stood upright, its height exceeding 3 meters, resembling a towering black iron tower, putting considerable pressure on Yang Ming and his companions. Since Yang Ming was a new member, he was specially assigned to be last by Garp, so that Yang Ming would have more time to observe how the other three fought the black bear. Yang Ming was happy to do so, taking the opportunity to observe and learn from the sidelines. Under Garp's arrangement, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy appeared in turn. Ace and Sabo both knew how to make full use of their advantages, avoiding a contest of strength with the black bear, instead constantly dodging and weaving, taking the opportunity to strike the bear's knees. Even though the black bear had thick hide and tough flesh, it was still being beaten by Ace and Sabo in turns, howling in pain. As for Luffy, his attacks rely entirely on shouting, and his moves are all about brute force, there's absolutely no strategy involved. The fight between Luffy and the black bear was utterly pointless, infuriating Garp to the point of turning red in the face as he roared and yelled from the sidelines. If Luffy hadn't eaten a devil fruit that made his body rubber, reducing the pain from attacks, anyone else fighting in this way would probably have died countless times over. After Luffy finished his battle, it was finally Yang Ming's turn to enter the fray. Garp was utterly speechless at Luffy's antics. He channeled his grief and anger into his appetite, chewing on a donut and asking, his words slightly slurred, "Yang Ming, are you mentally prepared?" Yang Ming nodded emphatically, a resolute glint in his eyes, and said, "I feel my youth is boiling over." Garp grinned, thinking Yang Ming's answer was excellent and very much in line with his temperament. At the same time, a system notification sounded in Yang Ming's mind. Ding! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Naruto. You have been awarded one chance to draw a prize. Would you like to activate the prize wheel? Yang Ming faced the black bear in the center of the backyard. After being overwhelmed by the three kids, the bear's anger had reached its peak. Its eyes were bloodshot, and it exuded a violent aura, as if it wanted to tear the human brat in front of it to pieces. Feeling the overwhelming malice, Yang Ming tensed his muscles and assumed a fighting stance. At the same time, Yang Ming thought to himself, "Hopefully, I'll be able to win a suitable prize later." Raffle. Chapter 6. Roar. The black bear roared and slapped Yang Ming with its paw. The claws tore through the gale, but failed to strike anyone, as Yang Ming, who was prepared, anticipated and dodged the attack. Bang! The bear's paw slammed heavily onto the ground, leaving a paw print and kicking up a cloud of dust. Yang Ming started running clockwise around the black bear to avoid its attacks. Meanwhile, Yang Ming's attention was drawn to the lottery wheel, which was out of sight of others. Summoned characters: Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi. Ninjutsu/Taijutsu, Great Fireball Technique, water dragon technique, dark travel technique. Bloodline limit, ice release, magnetic release, melting release, explosive release. If I could draw these bloodline limits. Yang Ming shook his head, dismissing such a delusional idea from his mind. Judging from the odds on the lottery wheel, the more precious and powerful the ninjutsu and bloodline limit, the smaller the number of slots it occupies, basically a probability of 0.01%. With such a low probability of winning, it's akin to winning the grand prize in the lottery. Only the luckiest person would have the confidence to draw such a prize. When the lottery pointer stopped, Yang Ming's eyes narrowed. Konoha Taijutsu, Taijutsu that takes 3 years of study at the Ninja Academy to master, giving one a solid foundation in Taijutsu. In that instant, Yang Ming felt a surge of memories and experience flowing into his body, as if he had experienced 3 years of spring and autumn in a short period of time, undergoing countless arduous training. Yang Ming snapped out of his daze, his eyes suddenly sharpening. When the black bear attacked him again, Yang Ming felt that the opponent's moves were too monotonous and direct, and he could easily judge the opponent's intentions. This time, Yang Ming didn't choose to continue circling and running away. Instead, he advanced instead of retreating. A real man should take the initiative. Seeing this, Garp's eyes lit up, and he thought to himself. Whether it's confidence or foolishness, we'll find out soon enough. Garp stopped eating the donut, his knees slightly bent and his calf muscles slightly tense, fully prepared for the rescue. If Yang Ming is hit by the black bear at close range later, he can quickly provide support using the shave technique from the 6 styles of the Navy. The black bear's swatter just missed Yang Ming, and the gust of wind that followed felt like a knife, stinging his face. Taking advantage of the black bear's exhaustion and lack of new strength, Yang Ming seized the opportunity to close in, stomped his left foot hard, and leaped into the air, his right leg fiercely kicking towards the black bear's nose. With a head of bronze, bones of iron, and a waist of tofu, just as wolves have a weakness in their waists, bears also have their own weaknesses, namely their noses. Leaf whirlwind. With a smack, Yang Ming delivered a whip kick to the black bear's nose. The nose is the most vulnerable part of a black bear's body. Even though Yang Ming's legs have less leverage due to his young age, it can still cause considerable pain to the black bear if injured. Seeing that his attack had a clear effect, Yang Ming immediately rolled away the moment his feet touched the ground, dodging the black bear's retaliatory stomp and causing the attack to miss again. The black bear has poor eyesight and cannot accurately pinpoint Yang Ming's location. Yang Ming rolled between the black bear's legs to its back and delivered a groin kick without hesitation. Oh ah! A heart-wrenching scream rang out, causing all who heard it to weep and all who saw it to grieve. The surrounding leaves rustled, and a few withered yellow leaves drifted down. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy felt a chill run down their lower bodies and looked at Yang Ming with strange expressions. During the previous battle with the pirates, Yang Ming apparently castrated one of them with a single shot, right? Could it be that Yang Ming has some unique quirk? The 3 of them suddenly shuddered. When Yang Ming's leg struck the black bear, Garp relaxed completely. Seeing Yang Ming use every means at his disposal, and despite the vast difference in strength between the 2 sides, managed to make the black bear howl in pain, Garp's eyes lit up. Laymen watch the spectacle, experts watch the details. Garp could clearly see that when Yang Ming first started fighting the black bear, his skills were still very clumsy. But as time went on, his fighting skills became more and more proficient, and they became so seamless that it was impossible to tell that his opponent was a beginner. It was as if he had been a recruit who had been trained for 2 or 3 years. His movements were concise and powerful, without any hesitation. What does this tell us? This proves that Yang Ming is a genius. Clap clap clap. Garp clapped his hands, then casually pushed the black bear aside, and said. That concludes today's practical lesson. Black Bear was so angry his nose almost twisted out of shape. He was just a hair's breadth away from slapping Yang Ming on the head, but this despicable man interrupted him halfway through. His eyes flashed with ferocity. Garp seemed to sense something and suddenly turned around to look. The moment their eyes met, even though Garp's expression remained calm, the black bear felt as if he had seen the most terrifying monster of his life. His fierce aura vanished instantly, and he let out a pitiful howl before dragging his weary and aching body back into the forest. The human world is terrifying, I'm never coming back. Only after the black bear had completely disappeared from sight did Garp turn to look at the four of them. I have to say, you are the worst class of students I've ever taught. Seeing Luffy's nonchalant attitude, even picking his nose, Garp was furious and gave him a good scolding. Luffy, especially you brat, how many times have I taught you to fight with your brain, not by blindly charging in? Look at Yang Ming, he's practically a rare genius. He's only had one lesson with me today, and he's already learning quite well. You should learn from Yang Ming, understand? Upon hearing this, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were all shaken. During training, they always saw Garp with a stern face, and rarely saw him praise someone like that. The three of them turned to look at Yang Ming in unison, and he said modestly. Teacher Garp, you flatter me. Yang Ming knew his own limitations, he wasn't a genius at all, just someone who had a slight advantage. Is this reasonable? That makes perfect sense. To Yang Ming's amusement and exasperation, he seemed to have become someone else's child, used by Garp to teach Luffy and his companions a lesson. Little did Yang Ming know that, in Garp's eyes, Yang Ming's answer was a sign of humility and politeness, which made him extremely satisfied. A broad, bear-like hand rested on Yang Ming's shoulder. Garp stared intently at Yang Ming and said, Yang Ming, come back to naval headquarters with me and join the navy. Yang Ming's heart skipped a beat. He realized that Garp was eager to recruit him and didn't want to see a promising naval talent wasting his time. He was deliberately extending an olive branch to him. Once Yang Ming agrees, he will be able to enter the navy headquarters as a new recruit. Yang Ming knew the plot was unfolding, and many of his ideas could only be implemented after he joined the navy. As for becoming a pirate, not all pirates are named Luffy, and they have a good father and a good grandfather. Any pirate without any background who tries to make a name for himself will face brutal extermination by the navy before he even reaches the Grand Line. Yang Ming possesses a meme-generating lottery system, but he's struggling to remember many lines, so his priority in the early stages is naturally to play it safe and develop his character. Yang Ming stood firmly on his feet, head held high, and shouted. Garp-sensei, I'm willing to become a righteous marine. Seeing this, Garp nodded with a smile. Very good, very good. Thankfully, Yang Ming wasn't led astray by Ace and the others. Garp almost burst into tears, realizing how difficult things had been for him. After Yang Ming accepted Garp's offer, the relationship between the two became much closer. At the same time, Garp also increased the difficulty of Yang Ming's training. These training programs are extremely difficult, practically insane. Examples include tying Yang Ming to a hot air balloon and letting him fly high in the sky, or kicking Yang Ming off a cliff so that he falls from a height of more than 10 meters into the sea, or driving several ferocious jackals and tigers out of the forest to chase Yang Ming. Regardless of the type of training program, they all extremely challenge the human physiological limits. Despite Garp's meticulous guidance, Yang Ming never complained and persevered through it all. Eat, train, sleep. Yang Ming felt like he had returned to his senior year of high school in his previous life, living a tense yet fulfilling life. You don't need to think too much, just keep completing a series of extremely challenging training projects, and you'll gain a pleasant sense of accomplishment. Young people possess unlimited potential. After completing the training program, Yang Ming greatly improved the efficiency of circulating the 6 treasures immortal thief through a large amount of food. The abundant qi nourished his depleted body, healing the hidden injuries remaining in his body, while continuously strengthening his physique. In just 2 months, Yang Ming grew a head taller than before, and his body showed obvious muscle contours, and his former thin appearance was no longer visible. Drink up. On this day, Yang Ming was lifting a rock that was as thick as two people could hug. This stone weighs over 200 pounds. In Yang Ming's previous life, this would have been an impossible task for a small child. Now, Yang Ming can only barely lift the stone. 23, 46, 99, 100. After lifting the stone 100 times, Yang Ming suddenly put it down. His arms convulsed slightly from exhaustion, and sweat poured down his body. Spurred on by Yang Ming, Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were forced to join in, training like madmen on the sidelines. Their frenzied energy was enough to make anyone tremble. There was no other way. If they didn't train well, Garp would use Yang Ming, this other people's kid, to teach them a lesson. I just can't stand it. Just as Yang Ming was leaning against the rock, quietly circulating the 6 treasures of immortal thieves to clear the meridians in his arms and relieve the soreness, he saw Kapu walking over. Garp cleared his throat, stopped the other 3, and said, "After this period of training, it's time to test your results. I'm giving you a mission, wipe out the Bursum pirates within 7 days." Chapter 7. The Kingdom of Goa, the final destination of the uncertain. In this area filled with piles of waste, sparks suddenly ignited everywhere, and these small fires gradually grew into a prairie fire. A group of pirates set fires everywhere, and in the flickering flames, they looked like demons emerging from the flames. In the uncertain destination, a large number of scavengers live, and when faced with a fire, they can only helplessly flee in all directions. Bang! Bursum raised his hand and fired a shot, killing a scavenger who had fled to the vicinity. As the captain of the pirate crew, Bursum's flintlock pistol was noticeably more advanced than those of the other crew members. It was a gun purchased at a high price from the black market, supposedly the latest model smuggled from the Grand Line to the East Blue by black market merchants. Unlike older flintlock pistols, which required a 3-second pause after each shot, it could fire bullets continuously. Bang bang bang! Bursum fired repeatedly, killing every scavenger who came. Along a narrow road, the pirate crew behind Bursum recklessly poured diesel fuel all around, gradually leading the fire here. For scavengers, their uncertain final destination is their home. Now, this home is being burned down by pirates, so naturally, a scavenger leader will step forward and raise a question. "Bursum, do you know what you're doing?" Bursum raised his head, and beneath the wide brim of his pirate hat, a somewhat sinister expression revealed a hint of ferocity on his face. "Are you teaching me how to do things?" Without a word, Bursum and his pirate crew unleashed a hail of bullets at the scavenger leader blocking their path. The scavengers were a bunch of poor wretches, they had no guns or ammunition. Under the brutal shooting of Bursum and his men, blood flowed like a river, leaving behind a field of corpses. A foot clad in a trendy deerskin boot from the Kingdom of Goa stomped heavily on the head of the scavenger leader's corpse. Bursum spat disdainfully on the ground and sneered. "You worthless scum! Once today is over, you scum who were born to scavenge for a living will vanish along with this uncertain final destination. And I will enter the town and become a high-ranking nobleman." The scavenger leader's eyes were wide open in anger, he clearly died with his eyes open in disbelief. After the group of pirates passed by, the fire behind them quickly spread along the oil stains on the ground. The raging fire engulfed everything, as if swallowing up all the ugliness and evil in the world. A scorching heatwave filled the air, along with the nauseating stench of burning corpses and debris. The heads of the corpses on the ground fell towards the city of Goa Kingdom, as if silently accusing the murderers who had orchestrated all of this. Those who live in the city enjoy fresh air, clean water, neat clothes, abundant food, and beautiful art, yet they never consider those outside the city as their compatriots. Instead, they see them as filth that pollutes the city, as objects that must be eradicated. Most of them were not nobles of the Kingdom of Goa, they might be tailors, pastry chefs, or coachmen in the city, but they all tacitly supported this argument. The Kingdom of Goa is sick. From top to bottom, the whole system is already terminally ill. On a mountain of garbage, 4 little boys stood side by side. Sabo's pupils reflected the firelight, which was not only the raging fire at the uncertainty terminal, but also the discontent and anger he felt towards oppression and exploitation. Despite being a descendant of nobility, Sabo felt no pride in his lineage. Instead, he felt ashamed of having noble blood flowing through his veins. His voice was filled with a tragic tone, like a bard telling a story. Ace and Luffy clenched their fists so tightly that all 10 fingers dug into their flesh. Yang Ming listened silently to Sabo's explanation, his mind clear as a mirror. He knew very well that even without the Bursum pirates, there would be other pirate crews like the Sapphire Pirates or the Black Cat Pirates who would commit the same heinous acts. Human nature is such that as long as the consequences of a disaster are borne by others, one can comfortably enjoy the benefits that follow. Rather than saying that the kingdom of Goa is sick, it would be more accurate to say that the entire world has become utterly corrupt. The monarchy reigns supreme, holding the lives of millions in its hands. The working class could only eke out a living humbly under the monarchy, toiling away for even the smallest necessities of life. The descendants of nobles remain nobles, the descendants of naval officers remain naval officers, and the children of farmers remain farmers. This is a cycle of fate. In this cycle, the world government and the nobles form a small group at the head, while the navy is the gear that keeps the cycle running. The majority of the population either accept their fate or choose to risk their lives to become pirates and break free from this cycle of destiny. Anyone who tries to become a pirate and disrupt the existing order and peace will be relentlessly crushed by the navy. The one who managed to stand out from this group of pirates and was not afraid of the navy's encirclement and suppression was none other than the 4 emperors who now dominate the new world. Yang Ming placed his hand on the hilt of the knife he was wearing at his waist. The knife was borrowed from Dodon's family. As he slowly drew his sword from its sheath, revealing a 1.2-meter long blade with a remarkably sharp edge that gleamed with a cold light. Ace, Sabo, Luffy, let's go! Yang Ming's deep voice rang out, and he charged towards the Bursum pirates under the garbage heap. Sabo's words were like a stone falling into everyone's hearts, a stone called fate and power. Beneath this stone lay the wailing of countless toiling masses, filled with resentment and bitterness. Yang Ming and his group were all young, and each of them had a burning desire to overturn this oppressive rock and vent their inner rage. The Bursum pirates spotted the 4 people not far away early on, but initially didn't pay much attention to them, seeing them as just a group of children. Seeing Yang Ming and his 3 companions approaching menacingly, Bursum, with what he thought was humor, said with a mocking expression. A bunch of brats who haven't even grown their first hairs yet, and they want to be heroes. The surrounding pirates, quick to catch on and knowing how to flatter, burst into laughter. The unrestrained and arrogant laughter is the condescending contempt and disdain of the strong towards the weak, and the trampling of the lives and dignity of the weak. The next moment, Bursum raised his flintlock pistol, ready to fire a bullet at Yang Ming. Flash! Yang Ming murmured to himself. The next instant, he vanished from Bursum's sight. Bang! The finger pulled the trigger, and the bullet landed on the open ground as expected. At the same moment, Yang Ming appeared beside Bursum, wielding his sharp blade with all his might, and viciously slashed down. Bursum was able to roam freely near the kingdom of Goa for many years, so he was certainly no ordinary person. When Bursum witnessed Yang Ming suddenly disappear from the spot and then suddenly reappear in front of him, his mind hadn't even processed what was happening. But years of fighting the enemy had already left a deep imprint on his body, and he reflexively took a step back. This step marks the distance between life and death. The blade flashed and disappeared in an instant, blood splattering everywhere. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out. A gruesome knife wound slid down half of his face, his left eye being directly blinded. Despite losing an eye, Bursum's timely retreat saved him from being beheaded. Crimson blood blurred Bursum's vision, the pain of losing half his sight pierced his nerves relentlessly. Enraged, he immediately roared an order. Shoot! Shoot them! Shoot all these brats! Upon hearing this, the pirates beside Bursum immediately drew their guns and fired. Just then, Luffy arrived. The moment Yang Ming landed, he rolled behind Luffy. The two worked together very well, clearly not the first time. Clearly, Yang Ming has teamed up with Luffy to fight enemies quite a bit over the past few months. Of course, at that time, their enemies were mostly ferocious wild beasts in the mountains and forests. Luffy took a deep breath, filling his chest and abdomen with a large amount of air, causing his entire body to expand from the inside out, blocking all the oncoming bullets. Using his rubber body, Luffy's abdomen contracted and expanded, ricocheting a large number of bullets around him haphazardly. Amidst the whirlwind of bullets flying everywhere, even the agile pirates had no way to dodge. One by one, they were wounded by bullets, and two unlucky ones were even hit in the head by stray bullets, lying in a pool of blood. Bursum fared no better, having been hit in the knee by a stray bullet and now kneeling on the ground. He covered his left eye, trying to stop the blood gushing from the wound, while his right eye was wide open, its pupil bloodshot, and he roared hysterically at Yang Ming and the other three. "Do you even know who you're fighting against? I am here on the orders of a nobleman from the Kingdom of Goa to burn down the Uncertainty Terminal. How dare you stop us? Are you trying to oppose me and the nobleman behind me?" It was less a roar of Bursum than the dying struggle of a wounded beast. He underestimated his opponent, and he will have to pay the price for it. In the Kingdom of Goa, the nobility were like a mountain to the working class, suffocating them. Even on the roadside, the working class cannot look directly at the nobles, for that would tarnish their status. Bursum had originally thought he could intimidate the four children by relying on his noble connections. With his free hand, he quietly raised his flintlock pistol, ready to launch a sneak attack. Yang Ming observed Bursum's subtle actions but paid them no heed. Instead, he calmly watched this pitiful wretch willingly serving as the executioner of the nobility, as if speaking to himself, or perhaps on behalf of the countless innocent souls who perished tragically. There will always be creatures on earth that dare to face the might of thunder. Chapter 8. Ding! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Genshin Impact. You have been awarded one chance to draw a prize. Would you like to activate the prize wheel? The system's voice, seemingly from heaven, rang in Yang Ming's mind, and even the scorching heat in the air seemed to lessen considerably. Yang Ming raised his sword to parry, blocking Bursum's enraged slash. With the advantage of being an adult and the strength honed through years of life and death struggles, Bursum's strike was extremely powerful, forcing Yang Ming's arms to sink downwards. The force from the blade traveled through the blade to Yang Ming's hands. He felt a numbness in the web of his hands and almost lost his strength, causing him to loosen his grip on the hilt. Fortunately, Ace and Sabo arrived in time and quickly surrounded and entangled Bursum, giving Yang Ming a chance to catch his breath. The Bursum pirates clashed with the four men. The enemy outnumbered them and each of them was armed, putting Yang Ming's side at a disadvantage. Taking advantage of the brief break, Yang Ming glanced at the lottery wheel in his line of sight. The prizes on the lottery wheel are divided into several categories: summoned characters, artifacts, items, talent skills, and skins. Summoned characters: Jean, Diluc, Clay, Venti, Mona. Relics: Flower of Life, Feather of Death, Sands of Time, Goblet of Emptiness, Crown of Reason. Items: Eye of God, Wind Catcher, Pocket Anchor. Talent skills: West Wind Swordsmanship, Wind Pressure Sword, Dandelion Wind, Riding the Wind. Skins: Sea Breeze Dream, Shining Concerto, Orchid in Gauze. The prizes on the lottery wheel were plentiful, but Yang Ming noticed that the probability of winning something good was only 1 in 10,000. It has to be said that this is a very challenging moment for those with bad luck. Yang Ming dodged to the side, avoiding the pirates' attack. At the same moment, the lottery wheel pointer stopped and landed on the item category. Eye of God. In the world called Tivat, when people gain the approval of the gods, they will obtain the Eye of God, an elemental magic organ used to guide elemental power. This Eye of God contains the power to guide the element of fire. Yang Ming glanced down and noticed a new pendant on his waist. It was square, with a faceted ruby set in the center, and a flame emblem engraved on the gem. In the continent of Tibet, there is a saying. When faced with circumstances beyond their control, people often lament their own powerlessness. At the steepest turning point in life, if a mortal's desire reaches its peak, the gaze of the divine will be cast down, and the eye of God will appear. The scavengers at the uncertain final destination felt utterly powerless when faced with the Bursum pirates, who were tolerated by the nobles, setting fire to the place. Yang Ming couldn't imagine what would have happened if he hadn't met Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. Even if he had managed to survive at the uncertainty terminal, would he have ended up as one of the souls lost in the inferno? The anger in his heart towards the darkness and tyranny of this world seemed to have attracted the attention of a deity from another world, who bestowed upon Yang Ming a divine eye capable of burning away all evil through a lottery wheel. Bang! 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 Yang Ming's heart pounded violently. He could feel the rage deep within him resonating with the eye of God he wore at his waist. The flames that had been burning wildly all around him, drawn by the eye of God, gathered around the blade in Yang Ming's hand like birds returning to their nests, forming a sword of flames. Die! Amidst the astonished and fearful gazes of the pirates blocking his path, Yang Ming glanced forward casually. Flames, carrying surging heat, swept past the swords and blades of the pirates blocking their path, unleashing their fury upon them. In an instant, the pirates' simple clothes became the best flammable material, instantly turning into a human torch under the licking flames. Even if he lay on the ground and rolled around, he could not extinguish the flames on his body. This is the flame that punishes the wicked. Yang Ming twirled his sword, appearing like a king wielding flames amidst the encirclement of fireworks. The surrounding flames could not harm him in the slightest, instead, they seemed to eagerly welcome the arrival of this new king. At that moment, everyone was stunned. As Ace watched the figure approaching, enveloped in flames, a deep emotion stirred within him, and a strange expression appeared on his face, as if there was a hint of longing in his eyes. Sabo's mouth gaped open like a koi fish, unable to believe that the little boy in front of him was his familiar friend. We agreed to have fun together, but you've been secretly working hard behind my back? Luffy smacked his lips and muttered softly. And you still say you're not a devil fruit user? Seeing Yang Ming approach step by step, flames swirling around him like his most loyal guard, the Bursum pirates were horrified. The image of their companion dying tragically in the flames was still vivid in their minds. They couldn't fathom why this boy possessed such immense power. The more vicious and wicked a person is, the more they cling to life and fear death, and the more they yearn for the pleasures of the world. The Bursum pirates retreated into a huddle, forming a defensive circle. You stay away. Bursum's voice trembled slightly, and even the arm that held the flintlock pistol was shaking. Yang Ming abruptly raised his head, his pupils reflecting the raging fire around him, seemingly revealing the fury within him, yet his tone remained surprisingly calm. When you recklessly take the lives of others, have you ever considered that you too might have your life taken? Ha! A soft, indistinct laugh rang out, and just as the flash cooldown ended, Yang Ming vanished from his spot. When he reappeared, he was already in the center of the Bursum pirates group. Turn into ashes of flame. Yang Ming used his feet as a fulcrum and rotated clockwise once. The flaming sword drew in the raging flames all around, as if to vindicate the unjustly killed scavengers, engulfing all the pirates in a sea of fire. The screams of agony, the cries of anguish, the thuds of collapsing, all these sounds filled the air. A foot crushed the charred corpse, and a young boy emerged from the flames carrying Bursum's head. The heatwave ruffled the boy's bangs, but his dark eyes shone like stars. Despite not appearing particularly tall, his figure seemed exceptionally imposing against the backdrop of the surrounding flames and burning corpses. This scene is deeply etched in the memories of Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, and it remains indelible even after many years. When Yang Ming and his group returned to Daden's house, Kapu was still enjoying a rare moment of leisure, lying on a beach chair in beach clothes, holding a photo album with stage star Victoria Cynthia on the cover, and occasionally letting out ambiguous laughter. "We're back!" The childish voice approached from afar, and Karp shuddered, immediately hiding the book in his hand behind his back. Karp took off his sunglasses and saw Yang Ming and his 3 companions emerging from the forest, covered in dust. "Hey!" Karp, with his sharp eyes, quickly noticed that the severed head Yang Ming was carrying was none other than Bursum, the very person he had tasked with issuing the mission. Although Bursum's bounty on the Navy's list of East Blue pirates is only 2 or 3 million, he is a minor character that Karp could easily crush. However, in Karp's view, such a minor character was more than enough to serve as a whetstone for Yang Ming and his companions. Karp originally estimated that even if Yang Ming and his 3 companions eventually defeated Bursum, it would still take them considerable effort, at least a week, to complete the mission. But to Karp's utter surprise, the entire process, from their descent down the mountain to hunt Bursum to their return to Daden's family, took less than 12 hours. Could it be that this Bursum is just a fraud? However, when Garp learned about Yang Ming's exploits during the entire hunt from Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, he immediately overturned his previous assumptions. Garp looked at the boy standing there, seemingly lost in thought, and couldn't help but sigh. "Yang Ming, your growth has exceeded my expectations." Garp still remembers that when he first met Yang Ming, the other party had just left the Uncertainty Terminal. Due to long-term malnutrition, he was as thin as a monkey, just skin and bones, and looked miserable. However, after several months of rest and relentless training, his opponent not only caught up with the training progress of Ace, Sabo, and Luffy in just a few months, but also surpassed them, and now he has given him a huge surprise. Seeing that Yang Ming seemed not to have heard him and was instead absorbed in his own world, Karp couldn't help but ask. "What are you thinking about?" Yang Ming gathered his scattered thoughts and said in a deep voice. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. How many scoundrels like Bursum are there in this world? If no one is willing to seek justice for those who have died unjustly, how many more human tragedies will occur?" Garp had already learned of Bursum's evil deeds from Ace and the other 2, and also knew that Bursum was being instigated by the upper-class nobles of the Goa Kingdom. However, sometimes, simply using force cannot solve the problem. If force could solve all the world's problems, then the Navy, with its many top-tier fighters, and the world government, with its Uranus, wouldn't be constantly running around dealing with pirates rising up everywhere. Garp didn't want this promising young man, who showed promise as a pillar of the Navy, to follow in the footsteps of his son, Dragon. Therefore, he avoided the topic and instead changed the subject. "Yang Ming, as long as you return to naval headquarters with me, you will be able to find out what justice truly means to you. Is it just?" Yang Ming's gaze passed over Garp's tall and imposing figure and landed on the navy cloak that had been washed and was hanging on a hanger, fluttering in the wind. The word justice written on it seemed somewhat glaring. Chapter 9. The Kingdom of Goa, a seaport. A naval warship with a dog's head carved on its prow is docked here. The Navy has a clear hierarchy, with officers of different ranks being assigned different classes of sailing warships. The warship in question is 65 meters long, 14 meters wide, and has a draft of 7.8 meters. It is equipped with 100 main guns, can store 30 tons of gunpowder and 110 tons of shells, and can sail continuously for more than 6 months. Its standard displacement is 3,450 tons, and its maximum load capacity is 1,920.1 tons. Currently, the main propulsion of naval warships still relies on the power of 3 sails. The mainmast is 61.3 meters high, the foremast is 54.1 meters high, and the aft mast is 45.7 meters high. The ship can achieve a speed of 9 knots by relying solely on the power of the sails, and the maximum crew capacity is 730 people. The hull of the warships, beneath the sea level, is coated with a layer of sea stone to protect them from harassment and attacks by sea kings. Such a naval warship would be considered a mobile fortress at sea, no matter where it is located, and it would be very difficult to destroy or sink it with ordinary shells. Yang Ming, dressed in a naval trainee uniform, bid farewell to Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. Although they only spent 2 or 3 months together, Yang Ming won over the 3 men with his actions and became their good brother. Of course, this brotherly relationship is better than that of ordinary good friends, but it hasn't reached the level of sworn brothers. The relationship between Ace, Sabo, and Luffy can only be described in one sentence. We don't ask to be born on the same day, in the same month, in the same year, but we ask to die on the same day, in the same month, in the same year. Yang Ming stood at the bow of the boat and waved to the 3 people on the shore. After I'm gone, there won't be anyone to make you compete so fiercely, so don't miss me. Ace and Sabo's lips twitched slightly. At such a sad moment, Yang Ming deliberately reminded them of heartbreaking memories. With Yang Ming joining them, not only did their training volume increase dramatically, but they also received daily lectures from Capra. Look at Yang Ming. I taught him once and he got it right away. I've taught you countless times and you still can't get it. Now, do it again. Yang Ming's progress today is due to his extra practice every night. You bunch of rascals should learn from him. Starting tonight, everyone will practice extra together. Work hard. Keep going. Strive. Are you really not even as good as a newcomer like Yang Ming? Ace and Sabo could still hear Garp's angry roar, which seemed to echo in their ears, and they were both in a terrible state. Of the 4, Luffy was the youngest. Having inherited Garp's shameless nature from a young age, he didn't realize how tough the training had been. He just kept waving his arms and shouting. Yang Ming, when we meet again, I will definitely become the Pirate King. Yang Ming, Ace, and Sabo all covered their faces. This slogan was shouted in front of at least 500 naval officers and soldiers. Yang Ming believed that if Luffy weren't Garp's grandson, he would have been hung up and beaten by the Marines who rushed over upon hearing the news. Luffy, I hope you've improved by the time we meet next time, and don't let me catch you. Yang Ming's voice faded into the distance as the warship sailed away, leaving only the damp sea breeze still blowing along the shore. After Yang Ming boarded the warship, he did not receive any preferential treatment because of his special relationship with Garp. On the contrary, it was precisely because of this special relationship that Garp directly assigned Yang Ming to the grassroots level, starting him as a trainee. Trainees live in single rooms, which can only fit one single bed with no extra space. There are no windows to see the outside, making the living conditions quite poor. The trainees did a wide variety of tasks, including sweeping, mopping, washing dishes, and doing laundry. These were the most basic jobs. Every morning, the trainees also go to the deck with other officers and soldiers for daily training. In addition to work and training, the Navy also has very strict requirements for the lives of trainee cadets, requiring them to fold their blankets neatly after getting up and to eat within a specified time. In addition, at night, Yang Ming would receive academic instruction from his deputy, arranged by Kapu, who would introduce him to the world's writing system, geography, maritime knowledge, and cultural environment. Yang Ming felt like he was back in the sprint before the college entrance exam, constantly on edge to complete a huge amount of work, training, and study, like a spinning top that could never stop. Most people really couldn't withstand such a high-pressure environment, they would probably collapse long ago. But Yang Ming had a fierce determination in his heart, and he persevered. Like a dried-up sponge, he absorbed all kinds of knowledge with all his might, constantly enriching himself. Initially, the naval officers and soldiers on the warship thought Yang Ming was someone with connections and treated him coldly. But after spending this time together, everyone gives Yang Ming a thumbs up when they talk about him. Those who have never sailed on the ocean will always have all sorts of fantasies about this unknown vast expanse, praising the sea with beautiful, poetic words, describing it as a fairyland. Only those who spend years at sea truly know how tedious and demanding it is to sail on a vast ocean with no land in sight. After being at sea for more than a month, the warship did not return to the Navy headquarters immediately, but instead wandered around in the East Daxia Sea. Garp was obviously slacking off and did not want to return to headquarters to take up his post so soon. On the deck of a warship, a boy in training uniform mingled among a group of naval soldiers, doing his daily morning exercises. Drink! 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 The boy stood with his legs apart and knees slightly bent, remaining motionless as the warship rose and fell, intently swinging his fists. The sun rises in the east, and the sunlight shines brightly. Despite being exposed to the sun repeatedly, the boy's skin did not develop a dark tan, instead, it showed a healthy wheat color. With diligent daily training and the abundant chi nourishment from the 6 treasures immortal thief through dietary supplements, Yang Ming not only did not ruin his body, but instead appeared stronger than his peers, with increasingly defined muscle lines, which is the best proof of this. That day, after his morning exercise, Yang Ming did not go to wipe the deck with a bucket as usual, but was called over by Kapu. Karp looked at the boy in front of him with kind eyes, and was very satisfied with him. Karp originally planned to assign Yang Ming to a lower-level position to hone his sharpness and test his character. A soldier's duty is to obey. No matter how capable a soldier is, he must learn to obey. Those who do not understand this principle will find it difficult to rise to a high position in the Navy. Fortunately, Yang Ming did a great job, better than Karp expected. Since joining the grassroots unit, Yang Ming has worked diligently and without complaint, burying himself in doing his job perfectly. He has also won the recognition of officers and soldiers throughout the warship. At Yang Ming's age, such a feat is truly commendable. To Karp's surprise, Yang Ming did not object to his arrangement for his deputy to teach him. Every naval commander is the soul of a warship. A naval admiral who is unfamiliar with the seas and the Grand Line will be unable to lead his soldiers across safely once his navigator dies in battle. If naval commanders are unfamiliar with the cultural environment of different countries, they may find themselves in a passive position when going to sea to carry out missions and dealing with local naval bases and local nobles. They may be unable to obtain sufficient information from the local area, and if the two sides become enemies, they may even be secretly sabotaged by local forces, making it difficult to carry out the mission smoothly. Such naval commanders are not qualified naval commanders. Garp admired Yang Ming and hoped he could become a well-rounded naval commander, rather than a narrow-minded naval officer. There are far too many narrow-minded naval officers, one more Yang Ming won't make a difference. The Navy, on the contrary, lacks a commander of leadership caliber. The current fleet admiral of the Navy is not lacking in combat power and strategy, but he lacks the ambition to make progress. He is good at maintaining the status quo but not good at making progress. Garp had always hoped that he could cultivate someone who could succeed Sengoku as fleet admiral. Unfortunately, Dragon, the son on whom Garp had placed high hopes, was too radical and actually took up the banner of overthrowing the Celestial Dragon's rule. This time, Garp didn't want to fail again. Yang Ming, you've worked so hard for so long, take a good rest today. After today, the warships will no longer linger in the East Daxia Sea, but will return to the Grand Line via the calm seas. Since he rarely had time to rest, Yang Ming naturally wouldn't refuse. As if to make amends to Yang Ming, Garp suddenly turned the warship and headed in a certain direction. In less than 3 hours, the outline of a building appeared on the horizon. It's a restaurant that floats on the ocean, the famous Baladi floating restaurant in the East Daxia Sea. The warship docked smoothly on one side of the restaurant and Karp and Yang Ming stepped onto the deck extending from the restaurant. Just then, a blonde-haired boy was kicked out of the restaurant and rolled around at the entrance. The blonde-haired boy got up, calmly dusted off his clothes, and shouted into the restaurant as he did so. "You old fool, my cooking method is the right one. That's how you make dishes that satisfy your customers." As Yang Ming passed by the blonde-haired boy, he recognized him as Sanji and paused slightly. Yang Ming turned to look at the blonde-haired boy. The boy's curly hair around his eyes was quite distinctive, and a hint of resentment lingered on his face. He couldn't help but say, "From the moment you step into the kitchen, you bear the responsibility of cooking delicious food. I think this is the attitude a chef should have." Upon hearing this, Sanji was slightly taken aback. He had assumed that the person who uttered such philosophical words must be a seasoned chef. But when Sanji looked in the direction of the voice, he found that the other person was a boy not much older than himself, and he immediately became so angry that his nose twisted. "What right do you have to lecture me?" Chapter 10. What right do you have to lecture me? Sanji's temper is like a powder keg, it'll explode at the slightest touch. Especially in the area of cooking, which she has always considered very important, she cannot tolerate anyone else interfering. Yang Ming frowned slightly. He was only trying to kindly offer a few words of advice, so how did he end up offending the other person? For these troubled children, normal people simply cannot understand them. Fortunately, the system's notification in his mind somewhat alleviated Yang Ming's dissatisfaction. Ding! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Food Wars. Shokuchiki no Soma. You have been awarded one chance to draw a prize. Would you like to activate the prize wheel? Before Yang Ming could make a choice, a middle-aged man dressed in a white chef's uniform appeared at the door. The middle-aged man had a weathered face, and one could tell at a glance that he was a man who had experienced many hardships. He wore a tall chef's hat, his mustache was braided, and his right leg, now amputated and fitted with a wooden prosthesis, was rhythmically tapping the wooden floor as he shouted at Sanji. "Sanji, I don't recall ever teaching you to treat guests like that. Aren't you going to apologize to the customer right now?" Zeph's words seemed to have the opposite effect, provoking Sanji's rebellious spirit. Sanji turned his head away, pretending not to hear. Well. Zeph was both angry and anxious, and finally let out a sigh. This great pirate, who once roamed the Grand Line, recognized Garp as the renowned marine hero the moment he saw him. The boy who was taken by Garp's side must have an extraordinary relationship with him. Zeph dared not offend him in the slightest, nor even show the slightest disrespect. Zeph, whose back was usually ramrod straight, bowed slightly, adopting the most sincere and humble posture, and said, "I'm so sorry, guests, I'm sorry to have startled you." He stepped aside and gestured for them to proceed. Garp raised an eyelid and quickly sized up the other person. Naval Headquarters keeps records of wanted criminals from all over the country, and one of the compulsory courses for every naval admiral is to memorize every wanted criminal. Although Garp's appearance differed slightly from that on the wanted poster, looking more downcast and, is a difficult word to translate directly, but it implies a state of being listless, dispirited, or decadent, Garp still recognized him as Zeph, the former captain of the chef pirates, known as Red Leg, with a bounty of 60 million berries. But soon, Garp lowered his eyelids, pretending not to recognize the other person. He had finally managed to ask for leave from the Warring States period to go back to his hometown in the East Sea, and he didn't want to work overtime during his vacation. Lying on a beach chair, reading fashion magazines, and enjoying quality time with your children and grandchildren, isn't that a wonderful life? Garp isn't like Yang Ming, a workaholic obsessed with competition. Of course, he'll slack off whenever he can, since he'll still get paid. As Yang Ming and Kapu stepped into the restaurant, Yang Ming felt his clothes being tugged forcefully. Yang Ming turned around and saw Sanji staring at him stubbornly. When it comes to chefs and culinary skills, Sanji becomes unusually stubborn. In the eyes of ordinary people, such people are either geniuses or madmen, a type of person not recognized by the world. Yang Ming glanced at the prize he had just drawn on the lottery wheel, and a slight smile appeared on his lips. "Didn't you just ask me what right I had to lecture you?" Yang Ming rolled up his sleeves and looked towards Ji Pia. "Boss, could I borrow your restaurant's kitchen? Commoner's cuisine. This dish is based on the lifelong skills of Soma Yukihira, the protagonist of Food Wars, and possesses the extraordinary culinary ability to transform ordinary ingredients into something magical. The moment Yang Ming received the prize, a flood of culinary knowledge rushed into his mind, as if he had spent 18 springs and autumns, countless days and nights pondering culinary skills. Garp paused, a look of hesitation on his face. Yang Ming, don't be reckless. Teacher, don't underestimate the culinary skills I learned by secretly working in the warship's kitchen. Yang Ming waved his hand, looking confident, and entered the kitchen under GP's guidance. Zeph crossed his arms and looked at the boy, who was not much older than Sanji, with a cold expression, somewhat disapproving. Even with my personal instruction, Sanji's cooking is still appalling. What kind of dishes can this boy possibly make? In Zeph's view, this was mostly a battle of egos between teenagers. Zeph secretly planned that, in order to avoid Garp taking his anger out on him and Sanji, he should just have Sanji act out a bit and admit defeat. It would be better than Garp and the Marines destroying the Baratai. The kitchen of the floating restaurant was very clean and tidy. Although small, it was fully equipped with all kinds of kitchen utensils. The moment Yang Ming picked up the kitchen knife, Zeph's expression changed instantly. This is... Under GP's astonished gaze, Yang Ming's knife skills were superb, like those of a seasoned chef who had been immersed in the art of cooking for many years. His movements were fluid and graceful as he sliced the ham sausage and chopped the scallions. Yang Ming turned around, turned on the stove, heated the pot until it was red hot, poured in the oil, and then began to stir-fry the eggs, rice, ham, scallions, and other ingredients one by one. Her small frame seemed to house the spirit of a great chef. Her hand holding the wok handle was always steady, and she had a knack for tossing the wok. As the ingredients flew through the air, the egg liquid gradually coated each plump grain of rice, forming golden rice that was perfect in color, aroma, and taste. A seemingly ordinary bowl of fried rice is ready, and its rich aroma is irresistibly filling the air. It smells so good. Everyone present twitched their noses, instantly whetting their appetites. No matter how proud Sanji was, he had to admit, with a heavy heart, that the boy in front of him far surpassed him in cooking skills. I'm starting. Before Yang Ming could stop him, Garp unceremoniously scooped up a spoonful of fried rice and put it in his mouth. At this moment, Garp's astonishment was no less than that of Zeph and Sanji. You're telling me this cooking technique was stolen from a warship's kitchen? This is outrageous. Click. With a sharp cracking sound as clothes tore, Garp felt his entire soul begin to ascend. The egg mixture evenly coats each plump grain of rice, allowing each grain to fully absorb the essence of the egg. With each bite, the aroma of ham and scallions continuously stimulates the taste buds. It was just an ordinary home-cooked dish, but Yang Ming managed to turn it into a 5-star meal. What delicious fried rice! Garp put down the spoon, belatedly realizing that his upper body felt a chill. Yang Ming watched as Garp frantically picked up the shattered clothes scattered on the floor, feeling utterly speechless. In Food Wars, the food causes your clothes to burst after you eat it. I never thought this would be inherited here. Yang Ming secretly guessed that this might be due to the cooking skills he had in mind, known as commoner's cuisine. After a brief hiccup, Yang Ming was finally able to calmly enjoy the food at the seaside restaurant. Black pepper pan-fried steak, charcoal grilled lamb, seafood risotto, cheesy baked lobster, cream pudding. Each dish embodies the chef's focus and culinary skill, bringing out the unique flavors of the ingredients and creating an unforgettable taste. Zeph truly lived up to his reputation as a renowned chef on the Grand Line. The dishes he personally prepared were a real treat for Yang Ming. To Yang Ming's even greater surprise, these meticulously prepared dishes, after being absorbed by the 6 treasures immortal thief, generated even more chi than ordinary dishes. Does that mean the better you eat, the stronger you become? Yang Ming muttered to himself. Looks like I'll need to hire a chef in the future. Of course, old men and brats are an exception, it's best to find a pleasing-looking cook. After a hearty meal, Yang Ming embarked on his voyage once again. This time, the warships did not linger in the East Daxia Sea and sped back to the Great Sea route. After Garp led Yang Ming away from the East Blue, the pirates who had been suffocating under the pressure of the naval hero immediately rejoiced. Xin Qing, that great scourge, was finally gone, and they all emerged from their hiding places. 2 months have passed in the blink of an eye. Yang Ming stood on the bow of the dog-headed boat, gazing at a huge building in the distance. The island is surrounded by tall white walls, which are manned by thousands of naval soldiers and hundreds of cannons. Inside the walls is a huge cylindrical fortress, wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. At the very top stands a Japanese-style building, which is the highest command post of the naval headquarters, also known as the office of the Sengoku Fleet Admiral. At the top of the flagpole, a naval flag fluttered in the wind, depicting a seagull carrying scales in its beak, with the word Navy below. At the dock, a group of naval officers and soldiers stood side by side. As the warship approached the dock, all the naval officers and soldiers stood in formation and saluted. Yang Ming followed Garp into the marine headquarters. Along the way, people came and went, all hurrying about and busy with their own tasks. Garp walked straight toward Fleet Admiral Sengoku's office, much to the surprise of the surrounding naval officers and soldiers, who secretly observed the young man beside the naval hero, wondering about his identity. Garp flung open the office door and sat down casually opposite Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Warring States period, I want to ask you for a favor. The Warring States Marshal was dressed in his marshal's uniform, with a series of medals on his left breast, highlighting his past achievements. Only the seagull on his hat marred his dignified image. Garp. The Sengoku Admiral took off his round mirror and wiped it, saying with a hint of exasperation, "How many times have I told you to knock before entering the office?" Garp crossed his legs and even had time to pick his nose. The Warring States Marshal knew his old friend's temperament and didn't pay much attention. His gaze fell on Yang Ming, always resourceful. He quickly understood what Garp wanted and said, "You want this child to go to the Naval Academy. However, most students entering the Naval Academy are already teenagers, he's simply too young. However, since you've asked me, Garp, I'll give this child a chance. Tomorrow is the first day of classes at the Naval Academy. If he can defeat any one of the cadets, I will make an exception and allow him to enter the Naval Academy." Chapter 11. Spring of the year 1511 in the Haiwan calendar. This year is destined to be recorded in the history of the Navy's development. On the huge drill ground specially designated by the naval headquarters, hundreds of naval cadets were running around the field. A middle-aged, burly man with purple hair led the way, occasionally turning back to glare at the group of students, and roaring loudly. "Did you guys skip breakfast? You look so weak and listless. Aren't you going to catch up?" After saying that, the purple-haired middle-aged man suddenly accelerated. The middle-aged, muscular man wore a navy cloak draped over his shoulders, his upper body bare, revealing his muscular physique. Having fought in hundreds of battles, large and small, his body bore numerous scars from healed wounds, which added to his imposing presence. Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Black Arm Zephyr. 23 years ago, after Zephyr's family was killed in a pirate attack, Zephyr stepped down from his frontline duties and became the head instructor of the Naval Academy, responsible for training the new generation of naval personnel. After running 42 kilometers, Zephyr remained calm and composed, while the naval cadets behind him were exhausted. Apart from a few naval cadets who were able to maintain even breathing without much effort, most of them were panting heavily, their hands on their knees. Running at a pace of 4 minutes per kilometer is a double test of physical fitness and endurance for any naval cadet. The trainees felt their heart rate soar, their hearts pounding wildly, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans poured down their faces uncontrollably. Zephyr glanced around, lingering for a few seconds on those outstanding students. "Smoker, Tina, Drake, Dottie Mazdison, Jonathan. It seems these are the promising students among this year's freshmen, the others are still a bit lacking. Just as Zephyr was preparing for the next phase of his teaching, he caught a glimpse of Fleet Admiral Sengoku arriving with Garp. Sengoku, Garp, and Zephyr were all students in the same year at the Naval Academy and comrades in arms who fought side by side on the battlefield. Zephyr quickly put down what he was doing and walked forward to meet them. "What wind blew you two high-ranking naval officials here today?" Garp pretended not to hear Zeph's barbed teasing. These old friends were used to roasting each other and didn't take it to heart. Garp pushed Yang Ming forward and said, "Zepha, today I want to recommend my disciple for admission to the Naval Academy." Upon hearing this, Zepha frowned. "Isn't that against the rules? Naval academies have a limited number of openings each year, and this year's quota has already been filled. Besides, this child is too young. Even if he gets into Naval Academy, he probably wouldn't be able to endure the rigorous training." Zepha shook his head repeatedly, his attitude clear. "Rules are rules, people are flexible." At this moment, the Warring States Marshal spoke. "Zepha, sometimes you're too inflexible and don't know how to adapt. I understand your difficulties, so I've decided to let Yang Ming challenge a cadet. If he defeats his opponent, I will exercise my authority as Marshal to grant him admission to the Naval Academy without prior appointment." Zepha's brows furrowed into a deep frown. If it were just Garp alone, Zephyr could refuse. If Garp disagrees, he's willing to fight Garp. But with the addition of Fleet Admiral Sengoku's words, Zephyr also understood Garp's determination. Zephyr glanced at Yang Ming meaningfully. Seeing his black hair and eyes, and his sharply defined facial features, Zephyr couldn't help but feel a little dazed, as if he were seeing Garp in his youth. That old BD Garp, could he be some kind of illegitimate child born from somewhere? Zepha secretly wondered, increasingly convinced that this was the truth. "There's nothing you can do about it, Dragon and Garp are just not alike at all." Zephyr took a deep breath, raised a finger, and said in a deep voice, "I agree to this in principle, but I have one condition, I must choose the student Yang Ming challenges." Marshal Zhang Guo raised an eyebrow. He had worked with Zephyr for many years and knew that Zephyr was stubborn and would probably choose a strong student to defeat Yang Ming, thus making Garp back down. In this way, Zepha was not only able to uphold his principles, but also saved face for both of them, leaving only Yang Ming to suffer. Fleet Admiral Sengoku glanced at Garp subconsciously, and seeing that Garp hadn't refused but instead looked confident, he couldn't help but mutter to himself,